Mr. Ikenwa, it's nice to have you around on the news.
Good evening. Nice having you on. Nice having me on, rather.
Of course. Will the tax reform bills have made more meaning and not met huge resistance if the labor unions had been carried along in deliberations?
Well, when you look at the composition of the members of the committee who were key to drafting this recent bill on the behalf of this government, I would say to a very great extent, except I have to go back. Great extent, major stakeholders were factored into that committee, were made part and parcel of that committee. And so to what extent that the labor unions, not just the labor union movement, are actually now saying that they were not made a part and parcel of it is still, something that is subject to scrutiny. But I think a committee that even factored in putting in the president of the Nigerian Students Tax Association. I mean, I think it was fair, it was wide, it shows that it was a committee that looked for broad consultation on the tax that was given to them, and they brought in as many people as possible. But if the labor unions now come up to say that they were not put at the forefront of this, and they were not factored in to be seen as major catalysts. It's also their right to say so, because when you talk of taxes, taxes have a great influence on the way that members of different labor unions that come together in the melting pot of this main labor trade unions in Nigeria are affected. Taxes are very important. So we should take a look at their grievances again, but also put country ahead of personal interests, personal ambitions, and let's see how we can, come to the table and forge the country and its affairs forward in terms of revenue generation, and most importantly, the fair distribution of revenue that is generated.
But then, Kenneth, the reform bills are said to be actually people-centric and would favor small businesses who are being exempted from certain taxes. One would expect that the labor union would support such reform bills, don't you think?
Fantastic aspects and facets of the new reform bills to see to it that most small businesses are exempted from paying tax. But I would just say that is an audio exemption if I want to speak the truth to power and the truth to the facts that are actually on ground. Most small businesses pay what I call multiplex taxes, taxes that come in different forms, taxes that go to local governments, taxes that go to owners of the land, taxes that I don't even want to begin to think of mentioning right now, even from the point of where they have to source their goods and source their materials to be able to make goods and services available to customers out there. So there should be a more holistic approach to seeing that that small businesses actually benefit from this exemption system. But even when they benefit, what is in it for them? When they benefit, what is in it for those that patronize these small businesses? So it's a good point to say that if small businesses that actually make up about 60 to 70% of the economy are exempted from this, why should anybody be crying foul? It is obviously because we know that when some of these policies are formulated, it does not factor in the particularities and the peculiarities of the Nigerian business environment that makes all forms and shades of taxes, rates and so on and so forth, to be paid by individuals without having anybody to actually complain to. So there's still more room for deeper reforms, and there's still more room to still carry everybody along. It is important that we have everybody on board so that we can, have a blueprint that is satisfactory to all and that is promising of economic growth, economic development, the fair distribution of the Commonwealth that will be generated from taxes, and distributive justice going forward. That will serve the purpose of social equity going forward as well.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, Kenneth, one of the things that the government said was that they are seeking to broaden the tax base, simplify compliance, improve revenue generation and collection, and strengthen fiscal federalism, part of the things that you mentioned. But then you still expressed a bit of skepticism in how that can be achieved. So I'm wondering if you can share with us, apart from ink on paper, in terms of the possibility, the workability now, what the government needs to do to see that what is being said translates into something that is feasible?
All right. When new policies and new reforms like this come into the play, it's very important that we look at not just the possibility, we look at the feasibility, the suitability, the workability, and the validity of certain aspects and facets of that reform, as it were. Now, let me take the viewers back to the classroom and take you back to some 200 years ago. The great economist Sam Smith did say that there are 4 canons of taxation, and so if a reform of this nature is actually going to achieve the all-centered, people-centric purpose, it must fulfill these 4 canons, and in addition to that, at least one other canon. And the first is equity. To what extent does this new reform bill of tax actually guarantee equity in the system? Now, when it comes to equity, should we be talking more about equity, or should we be talking more about Pareto optimality, which, in other words, in economics we refer to as social efficiency? So how efficient will be the system? Then the other thing that will make it workable, suitable, and feasible is whether there is actual certainty. As we speak, there is no certainty to the fact that what applies to the goose will apply to the gander, and what applies to one section of the country will apply to another section of the country, and there will be fair generation of tax and fair distribution of the proceeds according to what is being presented. Secondly, will it be convenient? I've done some consulting for some tax authorities, and I'm aware of the new technology in place to make paying of taxes very, very convenient. But we still see people going from shop to shop with forms of different revenue service, how convenient is that? And then lastly, which is a Nigerian problem, how economical and how efficient will it be? Will we be spending 10 million on operations to generate taxes of 7 billion, which for all purposes and intent comes to a deficit? And lastly, does it in fact and indeed guarantee fiscal adequacy? If these 4 canons, if these 4 pillars and canons of taxation are not in place, and if they are not well addressed by this new incoming bill, then I think that there's still going to be a lot of problems with terms of implementation, with terms of compliance, and in terms of administration. So let's get these 5 canons right, and then let's bring everybody to the table, and then let's push for everybody to start looking at how to be more creative and drive innovation in different nooks and crannies of the country, and then it will be all smiles and prosperity for us all. I'm certain of that, at least.
Well, thank you so much. It's quite interesting that we have an Nigerian problem. I don't know if Argentina has an Argentinian problem with what the president has done in terms of rejuvenating the economy in the last couple of months. But then thank you so much, Kenneth Ikenwa, a business and public policy analyst, for sharing your profound thoughts with us on the news.